One dark, late night during the making of my Greylock video, I happened upon an account by someone known as DoctorNowhere. He created art of various monstrosities, usually overlaid onto various photographs of real locations. I enjoyed this art and would find out through a recommendation that he also had a YouTube channel. He just recently released a big video with this terrifying entity in the thumbnail, and people began to react to it. So, being the next hot analog horror on the proverbial YouTube streets, you know I had to check it out. The boiled one, as you might call this creature, is itself a cognitohazard, or a cognition hazard, with it possibly having some of the qualities of an infohazard as well. We won't get too into what these ideas are at the moment, but after we look at the boiled one phenomenon, we are going to get into the meaning and history of infohazards and cognitohazards, as well as discuss them. Hey everyone, this is Editing Ghosts here, and I just wanted to drop in really quick to say that DoctorNowhere actually made a community post detailing some of his inspirations for the boiled one, and I'll be adding in a section discussing that towards the end. But for the most part, this video is staying as it is, just with that section added in later. So some of this is going to be conjecture. Anyway, thanks. I hope you have a Bible nearby or some other various religious text, because we're about to dive into the horrific 10-minute short known as the boiled one phenomenon. Welcome to the Ghosts on Holiday video entertainment system. Hi, and thank you for joining us. Today on the Ghosts on Holiday channel, we're going to explore some creepy topics. What else is new? This video is made to help keep you safe and informed. Have you ever heard the slogan, "Knowledge is power"? Well, that's not always true. Some knowledge can seriously endanger your physical health and mental well-being. Such dangerous information is usually categorized as an infohazard or a cognitohazard / cognition hazard. Infohazards and cognitohazards are things that, if learned about or perceived with one's senses, can harm you in many different ways. This tape has been created in such a way to show you these harms and hazards without actually letting any of them befall you. Having said that, anomalous events, entities, and happenings are still incredibly volatile in nature. So if you feel any of the following: nauseous, dizzy, dry mouth, tingling pain in the feet or hands, the presence of something behind you, an enroaching sense of doom, or shadows at the corner of your vision that seem to move away when you look towards them, please take a break and view the rest of this video later. If some anomalous event or being does happen to establish itself within your perceived reality through an infohazard or cognitohazard, you should also follow the GhostsOnHoliday system known as FART, or FART, which we will later detail in this video. Yes, it is funny, haha fart, but anomalous beings are no laughing matter. So remember, if all else fails, fart.
And now, our feature presentation.
At the very start of the boiled one phenomenon, for just a moment, we see this large black squiggly line. Hate to say it, but this is probably important. We of course get told that some details have been changed to keep people anonymous, and the name drop of some type of organization known as Ephrata 228. And then, right out of the gate, we get another warning that, basically, watching this could allow anomalous things to happen to you. As stated probably twice now, a cognitohazard is a thing that once you become aware of it, you perceive it in some way, it's basically haunting you or can cause you harm. Something older that could be used as a reference would be like a chain letter, or even removed from horror, something like The Game, if you know what The Game is. Haha, you just lost it. But it was popularized online by the SCP Foundation, which there's a few things that feel like they are inspired by that in this video, which I really dig. I like that it seems like online horror creators are taking from other online horror creators. I do think this list of things is funny. Earplugs so you can't hear whatever this thing is, some things to write, and also Psalm 91:10. This psalm, of course, has a bunch of different translations, but essentially is, "No evil or harm shall happen to you, no plague or disaster shall come upon your home, or tent, or dwelling." You get the idea. Next, we get some instructions. If we hear something unusual, we should immediately put the earplugs in, and turn to our paper to write. The words that we write on the paper are, "I can see this paper, I can see my hand, I can't hear the screaming of thousands, I can't hear the feast, I am a moving, breathing human being on the planet Earth." But of course, right before we actually get this helpful thing to write down, there is a flash of something else. This shows the anomalous faculties of this tape. That something that flashes on the screen is, I can't see this paper, I have no hand. I can hear the laughter of thousands. I can hear the feast. I cannot move, nor do I want to. Eerie. What is the feast? Then we are to recite the psalm. I like the illustration because it's like if something unholy persists, pray, and the representation of whatever is unholy is just like an upside down cross in your head. If that's the unholiest thing that you're like thinking of, I think you're probably in luck, but considering what we'll see in this video, most of the people are not so lucky. Then if any of this happens to you, you'll be asked to contact the authorities, who will give you amnestics. It says, most appear to lead a normal life after, which is not very hopeful because, of course, that's not certain. It's like most appear to. Yeah, you might lead a normal life after. Amnestics, by the way, are a form of fictional medicine that give you amnesia, basically like a mind-erasing type situation. There's a movie called Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind with Jim Carrey that features a similar thing. Or in horror, again, the SCP Foundation uses amnestics a lot to clear people of things like this that could harm them just by knowing about it. That's probably what popularized the term amnestics as far as I understand. We then hit our title sequence, the Boiled One Phenomenon. We follow this up with the introduction of the Tree of Heaven, apparently taking place in 2003 on August 13th. A documentary-style children's program in Pennsylvania ran from the 90s to 2001 about the fauna and foliage of the state, and how to live alongside it. It ended because the host died. This was all fine until on August 13th, 2003, a rerun of the 13th episode began to play out of nowhere. This rerun started out normally, explaining that they're going to seek out poison oak to explore its origins and function in nature. By the way, the version of poison oak that they're seeking out is actually different than the one that I understand and am used to. Where I live, poison oak is usually like kind of a vine or a weed down on the ground. This version of poison oak is actually a tree. It's why it's called the Tree of Heaven. If you actually look it up, the Tree of Heaven is a large tree that grows very quickly and is actually an invasive species, and I'm going to talk more on that later. We then learn that during one of these reruns, a red melting face appeared, known as Phen 228, which I'm guessing is Phenomena 228. This face spoke to people in a disturbing voice, overlaid with clips of hospitals and people's bedrooms. Of course, anyone who saw it could seemingly understand what it was saying, even if they spoke different languages. We then get another warning that the clip has been edited basically to help us because of its cognitohazardous properties. So, in essence, some of the clip has been taken out and the audio is backwards. So to keep you guys from a terrible fate, and because I am technically classed as an anomalous being myself and can't be affected by this broadcast, at least not the same way you can, I'll tell you what it says after watching it. The full phrase is cut off slightly, as I said, but I'm going to tell you the full thing and what you actually hear in the video. The full phrase is, "The very memory of my face will cause a manifestation of my being in the future. You will be asleep in bed. I will be there and watch over you. When you wake, you will not be able to move any part of you. When the doctors eventually find you, they will not see me, but you will, and I'll see you too. Forever, I'll see you." How sweet. The version in the video starts from the word cause. The broadcast would be known as Broadcast 813 and would be seen by approximately 530 residents of South Pennsylvania who were obviously scared by what they'd seen. Apparently, besides the fear this caused, the broadcast had other side effects. Which, yes, there probably wouldn't be so much precaution if it was just a normal, weird, and creepy broadcast, and yeah, I'm pretty sure even the phenomena itself says that there would be things happening like that, so. The image of the creature that they saw would not leave their mind. Some even heard its voice. One person heard trumpets before going to bed. We'll hear more on that later. Like, I wonder if they're pretty ones or ominous ones. I imagine ominous trumpets because, you know, this is very ominous looking. The day after the broadcast, August 14th, Ephrata ordered the power to be shut off for most of the region to stop the spread of the anomaly and the possible cognitohazardous facets of it. Of course, this ties into a real-life event known as the Northeast Blackout of 2003. This was a pretty severe blackout that lasted 2 days for some areas, but up to 4 for others.
It took 29 hours for the power to be turned back on in most major cities, but the brief outage contributed to at least 11 deaths and caused an estimated $6 billion in economic losses.
It resulted in approximately 100 deaths, and troubles with local infrastructure during the period, affecting the availability of water and food, obviously, and of course, emergency services. The idea that the blackout was done to stop a paranormal entity is pretty cool, but the real-life story is even more interesting, which is just a catastrophic line of human failures that started with a single downed power line in Ohio. Which is crazy to think about, but not what this video is about. During this blackout, the recordings of Broadcast 813 and any knowledge of it were collected by Ephrata, and what they couldn't collect, they did their best to destroy. But for some people, it was already too late. 96% of the people who'd seen the broadcast were seemingly affected by what is known as a pseudocoma. As it says on screen, a pseudocoma is basically a waking coma. You can't move, you can't speak, but you can feel, see, and breathe, which is pretty terrifying even without the monster involved. Ephrata, of course, went out to interview people, but most of them were seemingly unusable or nonsensical, until they encountered one Job Zamperini. I'm going to say Job because Job as a name is dumb. Of course, this is a fake name to protect his anonymity. Job was fluent in Morse code as he was a veteran, so it made interviewing him far more accessible than any of the other people. Not only that, but his grandson captured a picture of what seems to be Phenomena 228 in his own backyard, next to a playhouse, which yeah, I imagine as a kid this would have been incredibly disturbing. We then get a clip from the interview by an Agent Gomez of Ephrata. By the way, during this section, I will refer to agents as agents of Ephrata or Ephrata. The agency within this little universe that DoctorNowhere has created is not actually called Ephrata. The branch of whatever this unnamed agency is based out of Ephrata, which is actually an area within Pennsylvania. So, just wanted to clear that up. During the interview, Job states that he fell into this condition after seeing Fen 228 on the television, and that it watches him through the window and is not of Christ.
When did you begin seeing this face? Interesting.
Not only does he see the face, but he hears the screaming of many voices, as well as trumpets, before he goes to sleep. The agent, of course, communicates with Job through Morse code that is flashed on the screen.
Sorry to hear that. Are these screams constant? Thank you. You shedding light on this is helping more than you know.
At this point, before Job's response, there is a red sequence of Morse code that is flashed on screen. This Morse translates to nobody but me and you, though when it flashes back to what Job said, he is saying, "But Lord Christ is with me." The interviewer tries to thank him, but the footage cuts. The being, the boiled one, then rises up in the window of the image. We see some fun text on the screen. This text says, "Wonderful day, the miracle of birth, and fetal fanfare." There's also some Japanese text which roughly translates to "fear of the one and only Watanabe bird." A commenter on the video noted that this is a reference to Mutsuhiro Watanabe, who was a Japanese war criminal who specifically tortured POWs. One of the men he tortured was known as Louis Zamperini, a former American Olympian. Watanabe died the same year as the broadcast, and while the commenter posits the theory that the entity Fen 228, aka the Flesh Sumac, could be the spirit of Watanabe, I personally don't think that's likely. The creator DoctorNowhere did confirm that this was partially the inspiration for aspects of the tape, and he wanted it to take place in Torrance, which was Zamperini's childhood home, but the blackout never reached that far. The being, Fen 228, then speaks.
Listen closely. Do you hear it? You will hear the laughter of thousands as the sky opens up.
We see blood rain from a hole in the sky. It develops a little arm which begins to just go absolutely wild. Just look at that thing, it's freaking out. We learn that this line from the start is probably it extending into the sky or in the tape. Here is what it says this second time. Listen closely. Do you hear it? You will hear the laughter of thousands as the sky opens up. You will hear the trumpets play their happy sounds. The scalding blood of life will pour down onto us all. Together we will be still. Together a feast for a king. Together melded by love and the purest connection. Be still. Be... We then see a couple more flashes, and it cuts to a warning screen, which basically is like, hey, it's probably best that you do the instructions we told you at the beginning. Here is the psalm, and we also get one little last bit of Morse code that says, I still see you. Yeah, very cleverly, the little beeps that are meant to sound like an alarm are actually in Morse code, and that's what they say. Pretty cool. But hey, what is going on? Right out the gate, of course, there's a lot of biblical themes and mentionings within this video. There's, of course, the very upfront ones like the Bible verse, Job Zamperini, and his constant reminding that Christ is with him and things like that. Not only that, but the unnamed agency in this video is from the Ephrata branch in Pennsylvania. If you didn't know, Ephrata is a variation of the former name of Bethlehem as well, and Ephrata itself was apparently established by a religious community that practiced a broken-off variation of Christianity, known as the Seventh-day Dunkers because of their belief that the seventh day was the true Sabbath. These individuals were celibate, slept on wooden benches, and would wake up in the middle of the night to watch for the second coming of Christ, and they also didn't eat meat. This group practiced a variation of Christianity that practiced two things that I particularly find interesting for this video, which is love feasts, where they would eat the meals that they believed that Jesus ate, and non-resistance, which is the idea of giving in to authority no matter what, even if they're doing you wrong. Another fun fact that fits into our boiled one theory here is that the only glass trumpet of its kind in North America was found in the original location of their habitation. The hearing of trumpets is often heralded as something that will happen when angels arrive. A hole opening up in the sky to rain down blood seems very biblical as well. The themes of birth, the idea of a fetal fanfare, and a feast. This might be a long shot theory, but it seems to me like whatever this is, Phenomena 228, or the Tree of Hell, or whatever you want to call it, is preparing people to be a meal for some horrifically divine entity. Fun fact, but in an Instagram post made by DoctorNowhere of the photograph of the boiled one next to the playhouse, he refers to it as the flesh sumac, among other things, like the Tree of Hell. If we go off of the Instagram post, there's a real possibility that it even chose the people who saw it specifically, because you only see it if it wants you to. Going off that post, a sumac is a plant that is also in Pennsylvania, which is used to tenderize meat and itself can be eaten. Phenomena 228, this thing, refers to not only itself, but those it affects as a feast fit for a king. Interestingly, the Tree of Heaven, which is another parallel name given to this being, in the Instagram post it's called the Tree of Hell, is an invasive species of Pennsylvania. This is double interesting when apparently the Tree of Heaven kill off actual sumac trees and other plants that are local to Pennsylvania because they secrete toxins into the ground that are dangerous to other plants. They also look like sumacs, so you could argue that this thing, Phenomena 228, is an invasive species, because it doesn't belong in our dimension. With all that in mind, the idea of birth, the trumpets, the constant biblical themes, the fact that the invasive Tree of Heaven is called what it is, I think this thing is a parallel of that. An invasive species that is coming in and possibly preparing people to be a meal, or doing terrible things to them in preparation for some type of entity. The horns are a herald of that being, as is the rain of blood. These are all things of biblical proportions. I mean, hell, maybe it does this to people to cause them mental anguish, and that's whatever the thing it serves feeds on. I think there's probably something greater at play, and if DoctorNowhere has greater plans for this little short into the future, and whatever world he's cooked up, we might even get to see this greater horror too, or things that it sends as well. Of course, again, this is all my own theory. This is just one short that is kind of disconnected from everything else DoctorNowhere's made, so we don't really know yet. Whatever's going on, we do know that the boiled one, or Phenomena 228, or the flesh sumac, whatever you want to call it, has cognito or infohazardous properties, so let's touch on that now. So, you've just watched a piece of media with possibly hazardous information. The things seem not right. Are you hearing voices? Maybe you feel an unending sense of dread, or even worse, a visual manifestation has appeared within your field of vision. A disturbing, unwanted being that is not of our world, at least that you thought. Well, don't worry. Here at the Ghost on Holiday video entertainment system, we've got you covered. As we mentioned at the start of this tape, we're just going to follow the FART protocol and everything will be okay. Do you remember FART? We mentioned it at the start, and we're going to tell you more about it now. Maybe you're laughing because it sounds funny. Well, my dear viewer, it's anything but. It could save your life, so let's jog that memory of yours. FART is comprised of the letter F, A, R, and T, and each letter has a very important meaning. The first letter is F, which stands for feign ignorance. Some anomalous beings are essentially energy narcissists and thrive off of your attention and negative emotions. If you simply ignore them, pretending that they aren't there, they might go away, or even better, simply disappear. A. Assert your understood reality. If step 1 doesn't work, simply move on to step 2. Firmly and angrily affirm your understood reality. Tell this entity that it is not real, that it doesn't belong here, and that our reality is not fit for such bizarre and horrific things. We do taxes and go to Starbucks. Horrific paranormal monsters do not fit into our boring day-to-day. Hopefully this will cause it to want to leave, or maybe even knock it out of that head of yours, but if it doesn't, it's time to move to step 3. R. Reassure yourself. Let yourself know through vocalizations and positive internal messaging that everything is going to be okay. These entities thrive off of your negative feelings. Unless they don't, maybe you got lucky and have some type of spirit dog that is simply a nuisance, or maybe some type of trickster fairy. But let's not hedge our bets on that. So simply tell yourself that everything is going to be okay and move on to step 4. T. Step 4, meaning talk to an authority figure. If all else fails, seek out an authority figure. The shadow agencies that deal with this kind of thing are on your side. Remember that. Phone numbers are hidden in various places around your home, including the bottoms of cereal boxes and graffitied onto billboards and the sides of trains. But if you can't find the emergency phone number, please leave a comment on this video to tell us the form of your emergency and the entity that you're seeing, and leave a like to enter the anomalous help queue. Below is the number of people ahead of you in the digital queue line. Thank you for tuning in. So, infohazards and cognitohazards. Most people online, especially if you've been into horror, have heard of the SCP Foundation. And if you've heard of infohazards and cognitohazards before, you probably first heard about them through the SCP Foundation, or a SCP Foundation related source, whether that be an article directly from the website, or a video covering one of those articles, or hell, even a game.
What's all this muck on the ground?
Save moment, save.
For the unlikely few who haven't heard of it, the SCP Foundation is a semi-fictional foundation that deals with the anomalous beings, items, and events in our world. SCP itself stands for Secure, Contain, and Protect. That's what they do. They acquire these things or beings and try to keep them away from the general populace to keep us safe, essentially, and for the most part. But sadly, some of the things within the SCP universe can cause harm without ever actually touching you. All you have to do is know about them, or perceive them. That's what the idea of an infohazard or cognitohazard is. There's also a class known as a mimetic hazard, which kind of falls in line between those other two. We'll start off with an infohazard. An infohazard is information that you might learn that can damage your physical body or mental well-being. Like I said before, you've probably heard of this before from the SCP Foundation, but it's an idea that has been around for a very long time. As with many things horror today, the person who popularized the basic idea of infohazards would be one H.P. Lovecraft. While this term was never used in Lovecraft's writings, Lovecraft, throughout his many stories, featured information that one could learn that would literally drive you insane. To simplify, this would usually be something like the knowledge that we're all actually in a dream of some sleeping god. I'm sure there's also something at play in religious theologies as well, and though I couldn't find anything concrete to represent in my research, you will hear things, especially in media, of like thinking the name of God or what God looks like in your head and that causing harm to you. Some SCP examples of infohazards would be SCP-1128, which is an aquatic being that when you describe its appearance or basically learn about its appearance in any way, it teleports you to this like other dimension and the thing hunts you apparently. And then, of course, the classic and ever terrifying SCP-2316. Remember, I do not recognize the bodies in the water. I do not recognize the bodies in the water. A real-life example of an infohazard would be anything that might cause you psychic damage, as the memes online refer to, like learning that your girlfriend put period blood in your spaghetti without asking you first.
Huh?
Anyway, a cognitohazard is basically a cognitionary hazard, which means an anomalous hazard you'd have to perceive with one of your senses. Technically, an infohazard is kind of the same thing because you have to perceive something with your senses, but like, you get what I mean, I think. This extends to all of your senses. It could be touching something, it could be seeing it could be hearing it could be tasting it. Again, H.P. Lovecraft is one of the ones who popularized this in our modern era. You know, you're not supposed to look upon the face of an elder god, or a painting, or a depiction of it, or even some ancient artifacts that you look at and they'll like cause your brain to melt or whatever. I was actually playing the recent reimagining of Alone in the Dark, and it features an item which, when you look at it, it literally teleports you to a dream world. The idea of a cognitohazard goes back a long time, actually. There are mythical creatures such as Medusa or the basilisk which have cognitohazardous properties, like looking in their eyes will turn you to stone or kill you. You could also count like the burning city of Sodom as a cognitohazard, since looking back at it will have the Christian God turn you into salt, you know, R.I.P. Lot's wife. An example of an SCP cognitohazard would be SCP-2, which is known as the living room, and it's literally a room that is made out of human flesh that when you see it, it kind of calls to you if you are around it, and you go inside and it closes up, and then it absorbs you into itself and you become human furniture. Rad, and also a terrible fate. A real-life example of a cognition hazard would be like staring at the sun, because it'll make you go blind. A more recent, but still older than the SCP Foundation example of a cognitive hazard would come from the author David Langford in his story Blit, B-L-I-T, a series of images known as basilisks make the rounds, which when looked at, kill the viewer because of a certain pattern within the images. This is a simplification, but you get the idea. Finally, a mimetic hazard is basically a subclass of the other two, which is basically some type of info or cognitory hazard spread specifically by people. A mimetic hazard that is non-anomalous, aka a real-life example, would be a really convincing misinformation meme that people spread. Again, this was something established by the SCP Foundation, but of course memes have been around forever. I'm not going to get into the idea of a meme and the history of a meme, but funny enough, they do predate the internet. Look it up. It's a pretty interesting topic if you want to learn about it. I think cognition hazards and infohazards are really cool because they are a topic that is in horror, especially online horror, but there's something that when you really think about them, you can apply them to so many things. Like one of the things that my brain instantly goes to is in the first Indiana Jones movie when the Nazis open up the Lost Ark and it like melts their faces. My brain was like, oh, that's a cognition hazard. Whatever is in there literally will melt your face off. That's a cognitionary hazard. Or if you want to count like real life information, you could say that the knowledge of how to create nukes would be an info hazard because of how dangerous it is to humanity and things like that. Of course, that kind of waters down the anomalous properties of it. As is the original point of this video, the boiled one, aka Phenomena 228, is in fact a cognitory hazard. Seeing him seems to establish him within your mind, within your world, and it will cause the effects that he says or wishes upon you to happen to you. Apparently that means anything that captures him, whether it be a picture or a videotape. Even though I think it says that the picture is safe, it always seems to be a case where I wouldn't really trust that. So yeah, I think cognitohazards and infohazards are really interesting. The idea of learning information that can just harm you from perceiving it or learning it. You see a tiger off in the distance, it's physical, it can come and attack you, but you can avoid it, you can fight it back. But what if you just saw the tiger and seeing the tiger harmed you? You know, you wouldn't even be able to know until it was already happening.
Bonus stage!
Originally, I was going to make a second video, but I decided to keep everything in one place. So here's a little extra, a little bonus. I'm going to go over the other art that DoctorNowhere has created. DoctorNowhere seemingly started their content creation journey on Instagram by creating these mixed media works combining their terrifying drawings with real-life photos. These drawings mix well with the low resolution of the photos and look as if these otherworldly and uncanny creatures are actually in the space with a photographer. Like someone just happens to live in a town with all these funky, freaky little creatures and stuff like that. I really like that. Apparently, the first of these were posted in 2020, and DoctorNowhere has said that he is 17 now, so that would mean he was 13 when he started making these, which is just insane. Like, I was not making anything of this quality at that age. He is just built different. This was the first picture uploaded, or at least that you can find on the Instagram, and it's basically just like a little dude with some really long pencil limbs, just kind of staring at you. That face when your friend wakes you up in the middle of the night and wants a glass of milk. We've got this floating top hat guy, a flesh creature called the entrail, because it's made of human organs, and that's fucking cool and metal as fuck. Does it steal them, or like, does it just happen to be made of human organs, like, coincidentally? Some of these entities just seem to be, like, not doing much. They're just kind of hanging out, and they're just scary looking, you know? Like this little monkey fella, he's just vibing there, and also happens to be monstrous and scary looking. This isn't always the case, of course. There's a lot of these creations that DoctorNowhere has made that are very dangerous. Like this thing, which is called a flesh bed. It's a monster that hides under a mattress and then kills you and leaves your bones inside of the mattress after consuming you. Or this, which has a little story of a dad and son seeing this guy, and that's apparently a criminal, and I really do hope they get away. Or this laughing guy, which I just think is kind of funny, but apparently he killed the two people that are in the description's story. Yeesh. We gotta cancel this guy. You can't just get away with that. But yeah, some of these entities are dangerous, like really dangerous. But then there's this dude. It's just a deer with long legs. Doesn't really seem like it has any ill intent, just some long gangly ass legs. Or this, bedtime friend. Aw, friend. If any of this looks cool to you, please go check out DoctorNowhere's Instagram. Honestly, a lot of his art is just really fucking cool and scary. You can see some of my favorites on screen right now. Some are just little pieces of art, some have stories attached to them, little vignettes written by DoctorNowhere. It's all really interesting. It's the kind of stuff that you can just thumb through on your phone, give you that twinge of like little bit of fear and fun. Some of it's even cute, like, look at this little dude, I wonder what he's thinking about. And some of it isn't even really scary, it's just cool. This piece up near the top, that's really recent, it's called Sunworld. It evokes, like, I wanted to say Dark Souls, but then you see that the town below is really modern. It gives me like an indie horror vibe, and I kind of love it. Reminds me of like Wicker Man. There's this giant oppressive statue of the sun on top of this town, over this mountain, that's looking down on the city. So ominous and foreboding, even though it seems like everything is fine. It's just cool stuff. Again, I really recommend you go check it out. Give it a look, give it a thumb through, give them a follow. You can also get some insight into like future projects. DoctorNowhere actually posted about the Boiled One character weeks before the short was ever posted on YouTube, and also gave the extra information that I used in this video. So yeah, check him out. And now that we've covered one of the few off pieces of art on Instagram, I also wanted to cover one of the little stories that DoctorNowhere made on his story, funny enough. And that is called Dave. Don't take Dave too seriously, it's just a spooky little story that DoctorNowhere created with people sending him messages and him like writing them into this story. And I think it's cool, and I just wanted to show and share it with you guys to give you more incentive to go check out DoctorNowhere. Dave is this rather normal-looking fellow, very round-headed. Dave also has a bunch of corpses in his house that he makes into dolls and just kind of hangs out with them. Or at least they might be corpses. Some of the text implies that they're actually still alive. Dave apparently lives on a floating island and is possibly a figment of Eddie's imagination. Who's Eddie? The one dreaming all of this. Boom! Eddie wakes up. Eddie keeps hearing the voice of Jim, who is one of the corpses hanging out with Dave, who is apparently his long-lost son. Plot twist. In part 2, we get Ted, a terrifying mutant stick man who begins hunting Eddie. Eddie goes and talks to his friend, the one-eyed fungus, an old friend of his, a little mushroom guy. Ted kills the fungus because Ted is a nasty bastard. Eddie kills Ted, and then he wakes up and he goes out of his bedroom into the living room and hugs his son, realizing he'd been a neglectful father. Boom, we got the good ending. Pretty sweet and creepy, but mostly sweet there at the end. That's all I'm going to show you on DoctorNowhere's Instagram. Like I said earlier, and I'm just repeating myself over and over again, if you enjoyed it, go check it out, please. He's very creative. And now, on to the rest of his YouTube horror. The first thing we've got is t.o.e starving.help. This is a really short video of this terrifying thing just banging on some glass as if it's trying to get out. Apparently this thing is called the Locust. I learned that from a comment somewhere, I don't remember where. Short, sweet, and scary. There's not really much to it, just an unsettling creature that wants out of your computer and into your home. It's cold outside, let them in. But soon we actually figure out there's more to this than we thought. Next we've got, has this ever happened to you? All the lights.
We have a brilliant solution.
This is another horror short, and I really dig this one because I actually have this exact fear sometimes being alone in the dark at the house at night, especially because I'm a night owl. So it kind of made me smile to know, hey, other people get that same weird feeling too. I get one like that when I drive my car late at night, I always imagine there's like a creature flying behind my car, like some type of horrifying wraith-like monster. And if I look in my rearview mirror, I'll just see it like ducking under my car or whatever. And if I slow down, it's gonna get me. And sometimes this makes me speed up and look over my shoulder. I'm fine mentally, don't worry, nothing's haunting me. Anyway, next we've got Toe Love.Thumper.
Hello? What do you want?
Seemingly the same creature from the other short is back. I was right the first time, but instead of it being in someone's computer, it's in their TV screen. It gets out seemingly as they try to tell it to like stop, and eventually it gets them. The ending has this text saying that the body appeared to be untouched, which you know implies that they found whoever it was that it killed, but there were no signs as to how it killed them. I like that there's a mix of different horror vignettes with these different little series. You've got this Toe series, you've got these other little shorts, then you've got the boiled one. They're all very different. It's just seeming like DoctorNowhere has these ideas, and he's just kind of throwing them out there, and I dig that. Also, I wanted to add this just randomly, but like I keep getting shivers because it's late at night while I'm editing this, and it's just, these are scary, genuinely just scary to look at even without the audio. Part 3 of the Toe saga is called Making Friends. I like immediately that the resolution is different. It's like the video is like a perfect square, like an old YouTube video or an old analog TV, which of course is what a lot of analog horror tries to replicate, is that older visual aesthetic. Now we're getting somewhere. This one adds a bit more intrigue. I know I was talking about how they weren't really connected, but this one kind of does connect all of them. But I do like where it's going. Apparently this thing is like in our technology. It can even communicate through it. Apparently sort of taking over the account of one of the kids that it ate. It seemingly ate all of his organs, at least that's where it seems to be going. I do really like the inhuman designs of the locust creature. It's basically just a bunch of black wires and a face, and it seems to prey on people and eat them. In the final video, titled A Boy in a Bath, the description reads a short film about guilt, and is seemingly about someone being haunted by some type of entity representing the guilt of their actions. The entity is terrifying, the way it barely moves, half of its head is missing, it's twitching. There seems to be an implication of like a lost child or a child drowning in the bath with this character we see. Even though we don't really know what's going on, we do know this entity is haunting their bathroom, that they haven't taken a shower in a while.
Why did you leave me here?
And while the entity is terrifying, it never does harm our protagonist. It eventually does follow them back to the room and get in this crib that we see at the beginning. So yeah, it's probably something about like guilt and the death of a child or something like that. I mean, the description literally does say it's a short film about guilt. So we're just gonna take that at face value. Our main character probably let their child die or someone die, and it's just haunting them, and that is both sad and incredibly disturbing. And lastly on the boiled one, we have a recent community post that DoctorNowhere made talking about the inspirations behind the piece. Funny enough, some of these have actually been discussed in this very video a little bit without me even knowing it. One such inspiration is Unbroken, which is the biographical story of Louis Zamperini and his real tribulations being a war prisoner. This was a book that apparently DoctorNowhere was reading, and this inspired some of the themes of like post-traumatic stress disorder and dealing with things through faith and things like that, or at least like a strong sense of knowing what you believe That's kind of where the religious themes in the video seem to have come from. The rest of actually the video is just inspired by little bits that DoctorNowhere took from other pieces of mostly horror media, such as the voice being inspired by a video called Dining Room or There Is Nothing, which I'd never seen before until seeing this community post. Not much to talk about, it's just a very short and creepy video.
Rant.
Another inspiration is Tamino's Hell poem, which is a reasonably long poem that has the idea that if you like read it out loud that you are marked by a curse of death or something along those lines. Basically, reading it out loud is bad. Even reading it seems to possibly be bad, mattering on the variation of the story that you find. And that's where he got the idea of perception being harmful. I've talked about already a couple of times SCP probably being part of the inspiration, and I still think that that's the case, but I'll always love to get the inspirations directly from the horse's mouth so I can check out these sources myself and possibly find something else that I really like. And another piece of creepy short media that inspired this short was WPKEPKW, which is just kind of a blurry face making creepy movements with weird noises. I like the fact that DoctorNowhere said that he just wanted to make a creepy video that would be something that would have scared him in the late 2000s. I really appreciate art that just comes from like a simple place of trying to instill some type of emotion or feeling that something else made you feel. I think some great pieces of work come from that, and I want to give him credit and say he did a great job, honestly. Alright, so we've covered all of DoctorNowhere's work, and now I'm going to climb up on a soapbox really quick since this section is extra. Something that bothers me with a lot of analog horror and really anything put online is people who just instantly call out in comments whether or not it is valid for existing on some type of strange metric like, oh, this wasn't scary, oh, it didn't have like a cohesive plot, so it shouldn't exist. I get comments like that wherein I'm covering these different series that don't make sense, or the stories aren't like super cohesive, or people will just say they're senseless and dumb and not scary, and all these other comments, and it bugs me. I'm going to use DoctorNowhere as an example. DoctorNowhere is a horror creator, but he is also an artist. The creator of Greylock is also an artist. The creator of the Walton Files is also an artist. All of these people are artists, and yes, they're making series that have stories that are meant to be scary, but they are also art. And it seems to me that a lot of people online remove, especially like YouTube content, from this idea that it is art because it is on YouTube. Yes, analog horror does have story, it is on YouTube, it is free, but it's also just generally a piece of media, an artistic creation that is meant to elicit emotion. That last story with that white being, the boy in the bath, is terrifying. It could have no story, it could be about anything, it could be about a missing child, it could just be straight up what the description says, but it is a short film, as the description says, about guilt, and that's all fine because it's art. It's meant to make you feel something. It's meant to scare you or make you sad or disturbed. It can be 10 seconds. It could be 50 minutes. It's just someone's creation. That's what it is. If it does that, if it makes you feel something, in a sense, it succeeded in my opinion. And if it doesn't, that's also fine. Not every piece of art, not every piece of media, not every YouTube video is made specifically for you and your tastes. You don't even have to like something, but just because it isn't for you doesn't mean that it shouldn't exist or it's useless or it's nothing. That's not me saying you can't criticize anything, that you can't criticize art or YouTube videos. Art and YouTube videos, basically anything made by people is meant to be interacted with, and part of interacting with something is criticizing it. But like most of this stuff is free and online and is made out of a person's passion. And yes, even if they do want to make money, it's still like being made for you and you just get to have it. It's out there for you to just have. So keep that in mind, or don't. I can't really tell you what to do, but I'll try to tell you, just my opinion and stuff like that. Online art is cool, and just remember, there are people behind these things that are making them, and they make them because they care about them, because they have these cool ideas, and they want to share them with you, and even if it doesn't resonate with you, it's still a thing that might resonate with someone. It's a piece of art, it's a piece of thing made from a human idea, and that is beautiful. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. I'm GhostsOnHoliday, and good night. And remember, that which your eyes perceives, The sound which touches your ears. Hail, hail, death to Caesar. The great play begins. The curtains open and close. You are an actor. You are the star. When your scene ends, close your eyes. The director is watching. Sweet dreams, dear listener.